There is a moment, and if you have lived long enough, felt deeply enough, given enough of yourself away to people who never once asked how much it cost you, there is a moment you will recognize the instant I describe it. It is not the moment the empath breaks. It is the moment after, the moment the tears stop coming, the moment the ache in the chest goes quiet, not because it healed, but because it died. And on that day, something walks out of the room, wearing your face, speaking with your voice, moving through your life with your hands, and it does not feel anymore. Not because it cannot, because it has decided, somewhere below the reach of your own awareness, that it will never again pay the price of feeling. Listen to me carefully. The most dangerous person in any room is rarely the one who never loved. It is the one who loved completely, gave without measure, bled quietly for years, and finally stopped. That is who I want to speak to tonight, and that is who I want to speak about. We tell each other a comforting story about sensitive people. We say they are soft. We say they are the healers, the listeners, the ones who absorb the pain of a room so that everyone else can breathe easier. We say the world needs more of them, and we are right to say it. But we rarely finish the story, because the ending makes us uncomfortable. We do not like to speak of what happens when the healer runs out of the thing they were healing with. We do not like to imagine what waits on the other side of infinite giving, because we assume, foolishly, that a well of compassion cannot run dry. It can, and when it does, what is left behind is not weakness. It is not softness turned to mush. It is something colder, sharper, and far more calculating than the world is prepared to face. Let us begin with what an empath actually is, because the word has been worn smooth by careless use, like a coin passed through too many hands until the face on it can no longer be read. An empath is not simply a kind person. Kindness is a choice repeated. What I am describing is closer to a condition of the nervous system, a permeability of the boundary between self and other. The empath feels the emotional weather of a room the way the rest of us feel a change in temperature. They do not have to be told someone is suffering. They absorb it before a word is spoken. This is not a metaphor I am reaching for out of poetic convenience. It is a description of an actual mode of perception, one that operates beneath conscious thought, drawing information from tone, posture, the almost invisible tightening around another person's eyes. The empath's gift is that they see what others hide. Their curse is that they cannot easily stop seeing it, and worse, they cannot easily stop absorbing it as though it belonged to them. Now, imagine living decades inside that condition. Imagine every family gathering where you alone notice the unspoken resentment simmering beneath polite conversation, and you alone carry it home with you, turning it over at 3 in the morning, though it was never yours to carry. Imagine every friendship where you become the container into which others pour their grief, their anger, their disappointment. And imagine that container never being emptied, only ever being filled. This is the daily labor of the empath, invisible to everyone around them precisely because it produces no visible wound. No one sees the bruise. There is no cast, no bandage, no scar to point to and say, here, this is where it happened. This is where I was hurt. The empath's wound is accumulated in silence, and silence is the perfect hiding place for a wound that is slowly becoming something else entirely. I want you to sit with a hard truth now, because sitting with hard truths is how a person grows a spine instead of merely growing older. The hard truth is this: compassion without boundaries is not virtue. It is a slow form of self erasure. And self erasure carried on long enough does not end in enlightenment, it ends in collapse. There is a fantasy, popular and dangerous, that says the more we give, the more evolved we become. That endless self sacrifice is the highest expression of a caring soul. I want to tell you plainly, this is not wisdom. This is a wound wearing the mask of virtue. And it is one of the great unspoken tragedies of gentle people that their gentleness is so often mistaken by others, and worse, by themselves, for a bottomless resource, when in truth it was never bottomless at all. It was simply unmeasured. And what goes unmeasured eventually runs out without anyone, including its owner, noticing the exact hour it happened. Here is where the danger begins to take shape. And I want you to follow the logic closely, because it is not obvious, and it is not what you expect. When a deeply feeling person finally reaches the bottom of their capacity to feel for others, they do not usually announce it. They do not stand up and say, I am finished caring. Do not ask anything more of me. That would require a kind of self-awareness that the exhausted rarely possess in the moment of their exhaustion. Instead, something quieter and far more consequential happens. The mechanism that once let their compassion flow outward begins instead to seal itself shut. And here is the part that should concern you. The seal does not simply stop the outward flow of compassion, it stops the inward flow of consequence. The empath who shuts down does not become indifferent the way a stranger is indifferent. They become indifferent with the full, terrible knowledge of exactly what indifference will do to another human being. They have spent a lifetime learning precisely where the soft places are, precisely what wounds a person most efficiently, precisely which words will land like a blade slipped between the ribs. And when caring dies, that knowledge does not die with it. It remains, loaded, waiting, now aimed outward instead of used to protect. This is the truth almost no one says aloud. A person who has never understood suffering can hurt you by accident. A person who has understood suffering intimately, who has felt the full weight of every subtle human cruelty 1,000 times over, and who has stopped caring whether that weight lands on you, can dismantle you with surgical precision and feel nothing while doing it, not because they lack the capacity to feel, because they have made a decision buried below language. That feeling is what nearly destroyed them the first time, and they will not make that mistake again. Their old sensitivity has not left. It has simply changed employers. It once worked in service of connection. Now it works in service of self-preservation. And self-preservation, once it has been sufficiently wounded, does not ask permission before it becomes something closer to war. I think of the concept of the shadow, that part of the self we do not look at directly, the disowned material we push below the threshold of daily awareness because it is too uncomfortable to carry in the light. Every person has one, but the empath's shadow is a peculiar and potent thing because it is built from an unusual material. It is built from care itself, denied, exhausted, and finally rejected. Most people's shadows are made of impulses they were taught to suppress: anger, desire, ambition, rage. The burnt out empath's shadow is stranger still because it is made of love that was never honored, of generosity that was never reciprocated, of 1,000 small moments where they gave and were told implicitly that their giving was simply expected, simply their role, simply who they were, rather than a gift that required gratitude or limit. When that unhonored love finally sours, it does not become gentle indifference. It becomes something with teeth. Because what curdles inside a person who once loved too much does not resemble the mild disinterest of someone who never loved at all. It resembles betrayal turned inward and then eventually turned back out toward the world that caused it. Consider the healer, the caretaker, the one who was always described by parents, by partners, by friends as too sensitive, too soft, the one who feels everything. Consider what happens across 20 years of being useful to everyone and essential to no one's concern for their own well-being. Consider the mother who gave every ounce of herself to children who grew up and forgot to call, the friend who was everyone's midnight phone call, and no one's, the employee who absorbed the emotional chaos of an entire office while receiving neither thanks nor rest. I am not inventing an exotic case. I am describing the ordinary architecture of countless ordinary lives. And I am telling you that when that architecture finally gives way, and it does give way, because nothing infinite is built from finite material, what emerges is not a broken person begging quietly for help. More often, what emerges is composed, competent, unnervingly calm. They will tell you they are fine. They will smile in the correct places. And underneath that composure, something has gone cold in a way that no longer registers other people's pain as a reason to soften. It registers it instead as information, useful information, information that can be leveraged, avoided, or exploited depending on what the moment requires. This is why I say the empath who stops caring is more dangerous than the person who never cared at all. The cynic who was born cold has no memory of warmth to weaponize, but the empath who has gone cold carries the complete map of human vulnerability inside them, drawn over years of genuine feeling, and now stripped of the compassion that once made that map sacred. They know exactly what to say to make you doubt yourself. They know exactly how long to withhold a response to make you anxious. They know precisely which silence will wound more than any accusation. This is not a hypothetical villain from a story. This is a former nurse, a former best friend, a former devoted partner, a former parent who gave everything until giving became unbearable, and who now moves through the world with the fluency of someone who once spoke the language of love, but has since repurposed that fluency for other, colder ends. I want to be precise here, because precision matters more than drama. Not every empath who suffers becomes cruel. Most do not. Most simply grow tired, and their tiredness looks like withdrawal, like smaller kindnesses, like a slow and understandable retreat into self-protection that harms no one but perhaps themselves. That is not who I am warning you about tonight. I am warning you about the smaller number, the ones whose exhaustion is met with continued demand, whose withdrawal is punished rather than respected, whose every attempt to set a boundary is treated by the people around them as selfishness, as betrayal, as a character flaw to be corrected rather than a signal to be honored. It is this specific combination, deep sensitivity, repeated exploitation, and no permission to stop, that manufactures the coldest kind of danger, because it teaches the empath a lesson that can never quite be unlearned, that caring was not rewarded, that caring, in fact, was punished. And a mind that learns caring is punished will eventually, quietly, begin to optimize for something else entirely. Let me tell you what that something else looks like, because I do not want you to imagine a cartoon monster twirling some metaphorical mustache in the dark. It looks like charm. It looks like competence. It looks very often like the most emotionally intelligent person in the room, because that is exactly what they are. They read people better than anyone. They understand motivation, insecurity, longing, and fear with an intimacy that took a lifetime of hard-won sensitivity to build. The difference is simply this: that understanding no longer serves connection, it now serves control. And because the world still remembers who they used to be, the caring one, the gentle one, the one who would never, they are among the last people anyone suspects of causing harm. Their old reputation becomes their new armor. No one looks for the wolf in a person everyone remembers as the shepherd. I raise this not to make you fear every wounded person you meet, but to make you understand something essential about the architecture of harm in this world. We are taught from childhood to be wary of the obviously cruel, the loud, the aggressive, the visibly unkind. We are given almost no education in recognizing the quiet, calculated coldness of someone who was once extraordinarily kind and has since been broken by the cost of that kindness. This is precisely why it does so much damage when it appears. It arrives disguised as familiarity. It arrives wearing the face of someone your instincts have already decided to trust. So let us turn now toward the deeper mechanism, because I do not believe in naming a danger without also naming its root, And I do not believe in identifying a wound without pointing. Eventually, toward the path back, the root of this transformation is not cruelty, it is unmet need, compounded across years, until the person carrying it can no longer distinguish between protecting themselves and punishing the world for what it failed to give them. Every human psyche seeks equilibrium. Give and give and give without receiving, and the psyche will eventually seek balance by any means available, sometimes through collapse, sometimes through illness, and sometimes, if the person is unusually perceptive and unusually wounded, through a cold, deliberate withdrawal of the very warmth that was taken advantage of for so long. This is not moral failure. This is a nervous system doing what nervous systems do, adapting to survive an environment that offered no other way to survive. And this is precisely why I insist that the most important boundary any deeply feeling person can build is not a wall against other people. It is a boundary against their own unlimited self-sacrifice. Because the tragedy I am describing tonight is rarely caused by a person becoming too selfish. It is caused by a person remaining too selfless for far too long, until the selflessness itself became the wound, and the wound demanded to be answered. If you are, tonight, a person who feels everything, who absorbs the moods of every room you enter, who has been called too sensitive by people who never once asked what that sensitivity cost you, I am not telling you to become hard. I am telling you that the hardness I have described tonight is not the opposite of your sensitivity. It is what your sensitivity becomes when it is denied the one thing it actually requires to survive: a limit, a boundary, a place where your giving ends and your own life, honored and protected, begins. Let us be honest about what a boundary actually is, because I fear the word has become another one of those coins worn smooth by careless handling. A boundary is not cruelty. A boundary is not the withdrawal of love. A boundary is the container that makes continued love possible. Water without banks is not a river. It is a flood, and a flood serves no one, least of all the land it claims to nourish. The empath who learns to say no, who learns to let a phone ring unanswered when they have nothing left to give, who learns that another person's disappointment is not automatically their emergency, that empath does not become less caring, they become sustainable. They become a well that can be drawn from for decades rather than a reservoir emptied once and left forever after, dry and cracked at the bottom. This is the distinction I most want you to carry out of this room tonight. There is a profound difference between numbness and boundary, and mistaking one for the other is how good people quietly become the very danger I have been describing. Numbness is unconscious. It arrives without your permission, and it does not discriminate. It shuts down feeling toward the people who deserve your compassion exactly as thoroughly as it shuts down feeling toward those who exploited it. Numbness is a wound pretending to be strength. A boundary, on the other hand, is conscious. It says, I still feel, I still care. And precisely because I care, I will not pour the last of myself into a container that has shown me repeatedly it will never be filled in return. Numbness ends in the cold, calculating danger I have described tonight. A boundary ends in a person who remains warm, remains open, remains capable of deep love, but who no longer confuses love with self-destruction. I have watched, and I suspect many of you have watched, in your own families, your own friendships, your own long histories, the exact moment a caring person crosses from exhaustion into that colder territory. It rarely announces itself with a single dramatic event. It is nearly always the outcome of 1,000 small moments where the caring person's pain went unacknowledged, where their needs were treated as inconvenient, where the people around them mistook endless availability for endless capacity. If you are someone who loves an empath, hear this as clearly as I can say it. The softness in your life is not a resource to be mined without limit. It has a bottom, and when it reaches that bottom, you will not simply lose their kindness. You risk awakening something far colder in its place, something that remembers with perfect clarity every single time you took without giving anything back. But I do not want to end tonight on warning alone, because warning without a path forward is simply another form of despair, and despair has never repaired a single wounded heart in the history of this world. So let me speak now to the ones in this room who recognize themselves in everything I have said, the ones who feel the first cold edges forming, the ones who notice with quiet alarm that they no longer feel moved by things that once broke their heart open. If that is you, I want you to hear this clearly. It is not too late. The coldness forming in you is not proof that you have become a different, harder person. It is proof that the person you have always been has been asking for a very long time to be protected, and no one, including you, has yet answered that request. The work before you is not to force the old warmth back by sheer will, because warmth cannot be summoned by command, only cultivated by safety. The work is to build, deliberately and without apology, the boundaries that should have existed years ago. It is to say no without a lengthy justification attached. It is to let another person's disappointment exist without rushing to fix it. It is to ask, before you give anything else away, a simple and revolutionary question. What will this cost me? And can I actually afford it right now? This question, asked honestly and often, is not selfishness. It is the beginning of a sustainable compassion, the only kind of compassion capable of lasting a lifetime instead of burning out in a single blinding decade. I want to say something about integration because I do not believe the coldness I have described tonight should simply be suppressed, pushed back down into the dark the way it was pushed down the first time. What is suppressed does not disappear. It waits, and it grows more powerful in the waiting. Instead, the coldness must be acknowledged. Look directly at the part of yourself that has grown weary of caring, that has grown quietly furious at every person who mistook your kindness for an inexhaustible resource. Do not banish that part. Listen to it. It is not your enemy. It is a messenger, arriving late, but arriving nonetheless, carrying a truth your gentler self was never permitted to say out loud, that you have limits, that your feelings matter as much as anyone else's, that you were never obligated to dissolve yourself for the comfort of others. When that message is finally heard, truly heard, not merely tolerated, the coldness begins to lose its reason for existing. It was never trying to destroy your compassion. It was trying to protect it in the only blunt language it had available. This is, I think, the deepest truth hidden inside everything I have said tonight. The empath who goes cold is not becoming a different person. They are a wounded protector, standing guard over a heart that was left undefended for far too long. The danger is real. I will not soften that truth to make this speech more comfortable to hear. But the danger is not the whole story. The whole story includes the possibility of return, not a return to the old boundaryless giving that caused the wound in the first place, but a return to warmth chosen freely, offered from abundance rather than obligation, protected by limits that were finally, rightfully claimed. So here is what I ask of you as I bring this to its close. If you are someone who feels deeply, guard that gift as fiercely as you would guard a child. Do not let the world convince you that your sensitivity exists purely for its convenience. Build your boundaries before exhaustion builds them for you in that colder, crueler shape I have spent this evening describing. And if you already feel the frost creeping in, if you already notice that you no longer weep at things that once undid you, that you have grown quietly, unsettlingly calm in the face of others' pain, do not panic and do not pretend it away. Turn toward it. Ask it what it is protecting. Listen for the answer, because somewhere beneath that cold, careful surface, there is still a heart that once gave everything it had, asking only, at long last, to be given something in return. Permission to rest, permission to refuse, permission to matter as much as everyone it ever tried to save. That permission does not come from the world. It rarely has, and it rarely will. It comes from you, and it comes the moment you decide that your own well-being is not a betrayal of your compassion, but the very foundation that makes compassion possible to sustain. Give yourself that permission tonight. Not tomorrow, not after one more person is helped, not after one more crisis is resolved. Tonight. Because the alternative, the quiet cold I have spent this hour describing, is not a fate reserved for other people. It is waiting patiently for anyone who gives without limit for long enough. Do not let it find you. Choose the boundary before the frost chooses it for you. And should you ever feel that chill beginning to settle in your chest, remember this above everything else I have told you. It is not the end of your capacity to love. It is a call, urgent and overdue, to finally learn how to love yourself as fiercely as you have always loved everyone else.